Loud and clear. Dave, I'm getting your
Fantastic.
audio. Can we do a mic test, Dave?
Let's see. Okay,
Perfect.
excellent.
Perfect. Perfect. Great. So we have the speakers here, and allow me to introduce Dave. We have Colonel Anupam here. We have Kamal here with us, joining us from New Jersey.
Good morning.
Good morning, good evening,
Good
good
evening from our
That's
afternoon.
true.
side.
I need to remember the good evening part.
I know, yeah.
Yeah, in India, it is good evening now.
Yes.
That's correct. That's correct. And what we're going to do is we're going to mute all the participants and we're going to request them to obviously turn their videos off. We also have one of our senior advisors for the Advanced Learning Institute, Mr. Vishal Seth here. And
Pleasure meeting you. Pleasure meeting you, Mr.
Morning.
Vishal Seth.
great. So I think only the speakers will be audible and visible. We have, you'll be happy to know that we have about 210 registrations in total.
Mhm.
Excellent.
And this meeting actually allows about 100 attendees in participation. So there, people have started lining up since 5:30 p.m. IST. And right now, my team is managing at the back end all the entries and admitting people accordingly. So I'm super excited to get going, and we are also trying to stream this live on Facebook for the people who cannot get in. Probably try and they can catch it on the Advanced Learning Institute page.
Nice.
Perfect. So best of luck to everyone. You know,
Yes.
I don't know about you guys. I have butterflies in my stomach.
Uh, makes makes two of us. There you go.
That's
Good. Good.
honest,
I'm in good
honest,
company then.
honest confession.
I'm telling you.
Okay, so I think I'm going to request my team to start admitting everybody. Let's start getting the room filled in. I have all your profiles ready, so I'm going to quickly do a agenda run through between all four of us. I prepared about 5 slides, which includes 3 slides of your independent introductions. And the sixth slide would be a panel discussion, which is where I'm going to come to each one of you. And I hope you like the slides because I've tried to present you guys in the best way possible. I will be starting the masterclass, setting the context and opening this online event on behalf of the Advanced Learning Institute, making sure that everybody knows why they are here, the objective, the agenda, and post which, of course, one slide I have prepared on the critical elements of crisis leadership. What, in my opinion, are those attributes or those elements that we need to acquire as a crisis leader? I'm also going to touch upon how interesting, because when I was talking to some of the corporate leaders, uh, I was going to touch upon that. How interesting it is when people get confused between crisis leadership and leadership crisis. So a lot of people were actually talking to me and telling me, "Oh, is this about leadership crisis?" So I said, "No, it's about crisis leadership." So I think it would be interesting for all of us to kind of shed some light on that.
Yeah, every subordinate feels that the leader is useless.
I know. In a hierarchy driven organization like the defense services, Colonel Sir, you are very well aware how it is. Everybody wants to keep the boss happy and not really the subordinates happy. But that culture is also, sort of crept into the Indian corporate scenario and internationally as well. I don't know, Dave, you think there's a lot of hierarchy in the US?
Still, companies in the U.S., preach open and honest communication, and that is still a hurdle that is yet to be overcome.
I know, yeah. We need to go towards, flat structures of organizations. We need to, I think that's where the parity will come in, and even diversity will help, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how about your organization? Do you have a good gender diversity in your organization, or is it a traditional organization where we have more men than women?
So it actually is shifting to be much more diverse, particularly in leadership positions within the company. And one of the things I like what the P&A group does is they like to grow from within. So if there's a person who's identified that's doing a really, really good job, it doesn't matter man, woman, or ethnicity, they're going to be able to move up in the organization. And that's great because it brings a whole host of different perspectives into the business process.
Right. Yeah. No, that's very aptly put. What about you, Kamal? I mean, what about Novartis? I've never really heard a pharmaceutical company having a lot of women in the mix.
No, it's pretty interesting. Actually, it's part of our objectives. It's part of the objective of our global CEO, Vas Narasimhan, right? To ensure that the management of Novartis, right, focuses on diversity across gender, ethnicity, religious lines, right? So, and essentially what you're trying to get at the end of the day, uh, to make sure that, in the world of innovation, you don't know where the best ideas are going to come from, right? And if you self-filter out, right, all these different channels through which you can get ideas in, the company itself is going to be the loser, right? Both culturally, right? And we're also going to limit how many ideas, we can take to the next level potentially. So I think it's a very bold initiative. Novartis is actually amongst the top 5 companies in the world, that has been voted amongst the top 5 in the world to be a place to work for, more for its work-life balance, right? And its corporate
Interesting.
culture, right? So it's a very big pillar of the Novartis policy.
Oh, that is good to know. That is good to know.
Yeah.
I think today what's happening is that all of these, even now, more so after this crisis, I think Colonel Sir would agree with me that all the lines are going to get blurry even more. I think the
Absolutely.
boundaries are going to dissolve. All the work culture between US and India is going to sort of intermingle and mix. And I'm waiting to hear perspectives from Dave because, interestingly, Kamal, he has 2 of his business units who do business directly with India,
Yeah.
and that was an interesting perspective that I thought would, get our audiences also have major key takeaways on how the world is functioning today amidst all of this crisis.
Oh, I have so many questions, by the way, Dave, for you, and Colonel Sir, for you. I probably have more questions for you because I wish I could be part, right, of the folks that are signing in to listen to you, right, quietly, and post my questions in parallel. It's an amazing opportunity for me, and to be very honest with you, when Divya reached out to me, right, I jumped at it, right, because where do you get this opportunity to learn from folks
Thank
who
you.
are in the trenches? And Divya, thank you very much, by the way,
Thank you, Kamal. That means a lot.
including me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I can't. I just rewind that and play it back again. That's exactly how I feel. So thank you so much. This is great. So many
That is
questions myself.
so humble of you, Dave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Divya, for getting me onto this panel where I'm going to interact with 2 leading corporate leaders who I've gone through their profiles. It's superb, speaks volume, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from them today.
I'm just so excited because I can't wait to finish initial part of my talk and get to this whole discussion mode. And already you'll be surprised. I have a list of 12 questions which was sent to me beforehand, emailed to me by industrialists and leaders. So we're going to begin with those and we're going to be bombarded. So I hope all of you get time to ask each other questions, but from the looks of it, it's not going to happen. We are going to be
Yeah.
consumed with a lot of questions from the audience. And that is the whole purpose, in fact. But in between, I'll definitely try and accommodate each one of us so that it'll be a good, invigorating discussion, not just for the audience, even for us. We all are here for learning, right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good. So I'm just going to mute myself for a minute and check with my team if we are all set to go. We would like to keep up with the time. Usually we do, and people are just going on pouring in. But at some point, I'll have to sort of just stop the meeting. So I'm just going to take a break for a minute, and I'll be right back.
Excellent.
Excellent. So how's the weather like up there in Florida, Dave?
We are getting ready to be into the summer months where it rains every day, but we are
Yeah.
very dry right now. And are you up in the Northeast?
So I'm up in Jersey. I'm about 30
Okay.
miles west of New York City. And you know, can you believe it? It's going to be 68 and raining through the Memorial Day weekend in Jersey. It sucks. Absolutely sucks.
No, I can't complain. That's why, even this time of year um, or even in the wintertime, I try to be very quiet and humble when folks like you are very cold and full of snow.
Yeah, I mean that's why the Jerseyites, we complain all the time, right? We complain about everything, right? It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too wet, right? Too much pollen.
I hear you. And I'd love to connect after the meeting, whether it's LinkedIn or other stuff too. So,
Yes, it would be my pleasure. I mean, and even with Colonel Sir, right? I mean, I
that's true.
have so you know, I tend to dabble in what my wife generally tends to say is nonsense information gathering, right? It's just like sometimes stuff that interests me, and I just start reading about it. It's just random thoughts, right, in general. And the other day I was actually reading, and Colonel said this is specifically for the military, right, and how the military, through its internal education programs, right, um, there is a huge focus on decision making, the different frameworks to choose, right? There's a dissection of past wars, past engagement strategies, things like that, that you go through in in military school, right? And it's like an ongoing education, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So
Mm.
important, right? It is so important, for that to happen. So I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, someday we'll discuss that also at length.
Yeah.
Okay, we are ready to go, and questions have already started pouring in for Dave and Kamal. So we need to start now, right?
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very exciting Saturday evening, and thank you so much for joining us here and spending your valuable time. On behalf of the Advanced Learning Institute, I'm Dr. Divya Jaitly, and it is my privilege to welcome you all to this masterclass format. For the first time, we decided to bring in industry experts and global leaders, along with an Army veteran, for an interesting mix of conversation. My last masterclass, we ended with a poll where we asked all our attendees if they would like to see any of the interesting topics in future. And we gave them a choice of 6 topics. And leadership was one of the topics which came up front as number one choice. But again, leadership is a vast topic. I've done my PhD in leadership. And leadership, how it was defined back in the days, or rather a decade before, is now completely a transformed definition and meaning. And if you would have noticed that there are a lot of new terminologies and a lot of new definitions of different kinds of leaderships which have come into mix, especially in the corporate sense or the business sense. For example, we have agile leadership, we have situational leadership. But we thought we are dealing with this lockdown 4.0. You know, as fast as in India, at least, this lockdown is upgrading its versions, we thought we need to help all of you who keep writing into us, who keep in touch with me through the social and professional networking, to also help you upgrade your versions. So you can call this version, put your name, put your version number, and hope that you have so many takeaways, so many insights from across the industries that we are going to bring today, that your own software, your own version gets upgraded with some more learnings, with some more insights, and some more changes as a leader that you can, you know, define to your role, that you can impact, use to impact your teams, use to impact your clients, so on and so forth. So without any further delay, for those of you who already know us, that is great. Once again, a warm welcome. For those of you who are joining us from across the world, thank you for making the time for doing that. For those of you who are new to us, we are the Advanced Learning Institute, and I've been driving this change. I've been offering these learning solutions. We are leadership coach, we are skills mentor. We offer digital brand solutions, more so in current times where the businesses are pivoting to online and digital branding, not just for CXOs, directors, individuals, professionals, but also for organization that we also call employer branding. And we do online reputation management. It is very important for all leaders to stay relevant. It is very important for all leaders to stay in touch, not just with their clients, but with their teams, especially during the times of crisis. We are dealing with times of, you know, global pandemic, and COVID-19, I think, has shaken all of us up at a world level. It's unified us, unfortunately. It's taken this to unify all of us. It has helped us transcend boundaries, but at the same time, it has also given us a lot of time to reflect and a lot of time to introspect as to what is important. And today's masterclass on crisis leadership is going to help us understand whether during the times of crisis, professionally or personally, we should be reacting, we should be reinventing, or we should be rethinking. With that, I'd like to tee off this masterclass and hope that the next minutes, which are bound to come, are going to be extremely invigorating and full of discussion for all of us. So I've put together a few slides so that we can get a little sense of what I'm talking about. And when I was doing my research on crisis leadership, first thing that came to my mind, I spoke to a lot of leaders from the organizations that I do executive coaching and leadership coaching in. And they said, oh, are you talking about leadership crisis? I said, well, you have that anyway in your organization. It's not about leadership crisis. We are talking about crisis leadership. So it's important to understand that difference. But the first and foremost thing that I want to enlighten all of us is what is crisis? We all know leadership in different formats. We all know leadership with different definitions. It also involves a lot of cross-cultural communication. But crisis is something which is constant across the world. And I've put together these two symbols. As you know, in China, or rather the Chinese language, it is represented not with alphabets, but symbols. So you can see two symbols on your screen. This is crisis in Chinese. The first symbol signifies on your left danger. And the right side, the second symbol signifies opportunity. So it's interesting how danger and opportunity actually coexist. And when I was doing this whole quotes and analysis, and I saw that John F. Kennedy back in the day, you know, spoke about that we need to be aware of danger and crisis, but also be aware of the opportunity. And today we are going to be discussing how we can find that opportunity amidst a global crisis that we all are facing today. Allow me to share some critical elements of crisis leadership. And you know what? I promise you, I'm going to talk less because we have some industry experts and leaders waiting here to talk to all of you. But critical elements of crisis leadership. And I'm going to quickly just go through them. Number one is pioneering. As I understand in my 2 decades of experience of having led many organizations and consulted with many leading organizations, pioneering where we drive innovation. Earlier, it used to be, more of fancy words which were used in all organizations that you got to innovate, you got to think out of box. And many times it used to get caught up in the politics of the organization where your team leader, your manager, your vice president is not really welcoming your ideas or is taking your ideas and actually taking credit in front of the CEO or the CXO for himself or herself. But today, the entire concept has shifted. So, as a crisis leader, you need to drive innovation. And my request to everybody, those who are in touch with me today, either as a coachee or a mentee, I'm telling you that put it down on paper that in the last 6 months, what is it that you've done in terms of innovate and innovation of ideas and innovation of implementing those ideas. So it has to be a full circle. So if you've driven innovation in the last 6 months for your organization and for yourself, so one for your organization, one attribute for yourself. If you've been able to think outside the box, you've been able to implement that, see it to fruition, trust me, you have the key ingredient of becoming a crisis leader and a leader of the future. Next is resolving, where we need to inspire solutions. Unfortunately, in the Indian business landscape, and some of you might be aware and rather dealing with this on a daily basis, it's very easy to bring up problems. Everybody just wants to talk about problems. I was watching the news channels today morning, and all they were reporting that in times of COVID-19, what has happened? There's a recent cyclone which hit the West Bengal and another state, Orissa, in India. And what kind of devastation have we done? And the news reporters are going and they're trying to take interviews. What happened? Tell us, how do you feel? And I think that has to change as a culture. If we want to really make a difference, if we want to really be a crisis leader, we need to come up with solutions, not just to problems. So if you are going to your seniors or your teams or your colleagues or your family, you've encountered a problem, take at least 3 solutions or 2 solutions with it if you want to be a crisis leader. Or else finding and diagnosing a problem and saying a problem is very easy. So I think resolving, inspiring solutions is very important, as I understand, for a crisis leader, the second most important trait or a critical element. Third, I would go to is energizing, where we constantly align our strengths and aligning our strengths because we are all professionals here in this masterclass and we need to align our strengths professionally of our individuality as well as our organization strengths. So we need to sync them up. Gone are the days when, our dads and our mothers who were working, they could have 2 personalities, one for home and one for the work scenario. And they could switch, they would come back from work and they would be a home bird. Today, where we have luxury of working from home, the boundaries are getting blended. We are living in an era of digital disruption. So we need to understand that we need to constantly align our strengths. So whether it is offline world, online world, whether it is virtually, whether it is a live masterclass or a live session, or whether it is a module-based learning or presentation or a board meeting, we need to constantly align our strengths. And I often like to, share a beautiful acronym which I've created, which is called WIIFM. And this applies to a lot of our strengths. This applies to our skill of public speaking, but it's very relevant today. A leader needs to know that every person who is going to be engaging with him or her is going to ask, what's in it for me? So that's WIIFM. If you can, as a leader sitting on the other side, actually understand and be empathetic and be compassionate and bring that win also to the situation where you take care of WIIFM, I think you're a born crisis leader. And that's where you're aligning strengths, which is a tough balance, trust me, but we have to constantly do it to be able to be a good crisis leader. Next is collaboration. We can't do anything. And I'm leading by example here. I've collaborated with Dave, with Kamal, with Colonel to bring you insights from different industries. And we're going to get into their introductions, and we're going to get into, what rich, I would say, insights and enriching thoughts they are going to bring from different parts of the world. And that in itself is going to be a strong foundation of any future partnerships. Even organizations today will need to collaborate. Other than large organizations, there are many small and medium enterprises, there are small startups. Alone, they will not be able to tide over any crisis. So if they want to be effective crisis leaders, they will have to partner with like-minded, like-valued organizations or individuals to make sure that they are able to cross over any crisis that comes their way moving forward. Of course, we are dealing with one already. And not to forget, last but not the least, negotiating. Now, this is one of my most favorite element. And, I often in India have to tell many CXOs and managing directors whom I coach that negotiation is not about just numbers. Today, we live in a world where negotiation is about everything, and it starts from your first conversation, whether you're offering a win-win value, whether you're offering a higher value, whether you're often offering, a lower value, whether you're even selling yourself short. And guess what? We are doing it with our families and children all the time. I'm sure those of you who have kids, when you have to ask your kid to do something, you're obviously offering that, oh, you know what, you get like the A's and you get like a 98 percentile, and I'm going to take you to probably to Disneyland, and this birthday, this is going to happen and that is going to happen. Well, guess what? All of these are elements of engaged emotions. And that's how I like to call it, that because we are not clones of each other, not with our parents, with our spouses, with our corporate world, with our colleagues, with our friends, we are constantly negotiating. And that is a reality we all need to accept. I feel that if you are aware and you accept that you are negotiating all the time, you will be able to engage your emotions better. As a crisis leader, we have to maintain a thin line, especially when we are managing teams, between assertiveness, aggressiveness, empathy, and sympathy. And these are all different emotions. And how to maneuver and how to negotiate is obviously a very critical element of crisis leadership. So again, pioneering, energizing, negotiating, resolving, collaborating, a quick recap of the 5 critical elements. I call this the 5 hack if you want to be a crisis leader and a leader of tomorrow. Well, that's all for me from now. And I'm going to move over to the next slide because we have our guests here. We have comments and questions already pouring in. Before I get into introducing our guests, may I request all our audiences, all our participants, please type your comments, your feedback, your questions in the chat box. We have connected all over the world, so we obviously want everybody seen and heard, but the entire video and audio focus will be on the panelists. So I hope I have your consideration. Moving on, we have our first guest speaker here, our first panelist who's joined us here. Allow me to introduce him, a little about him. Kamal leads strategic data enterprise programs that drive business transformation and change across Novartis US. His remit is to ideate, conceptualize, formalize, and deliver solutions as per the Novartis business strategy roadmap. Kamal looks forward to contributing to solutions for business problems related to people, processes, technology, data, and governance as the US healthcare ecosystem continues its digital transformational journey. Part of what he enjoys in his current role is bringing order to the chaos and enjoys that journey. Kamal, you're just the perfect person for this panel discussion. Welcome to this masterclass.
Well, thank you very much. And just for everyone, right? Um, That is my corporate profile description. You will learn through this that I am very, very informal in my approach. The first thing is I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank Talon and I want to thank Dr. Jaitly, right, for even considering me, right, to be on this panel. It's a huge privilege for me to be here. I appreciate everyone's time, right? All of you logging in from different parts of the world. I hope you're safe. I hope your families are safe, right? All of us are in this together, right? This is going to be known as before COVID and after COVID. I mean, this is a
Yeah.
huge generational change, right? That's going to happen. And it's going to stick for the next few decades until we come across a similar crisis. Um, I do lead change, I drive change, I influence people, right, within Novartis to within my realm of capacity, right, at the end of the day. I am not a CEO, okay, nor am I a vice president, right? But it is extremely energizing. It is very chaotic. And over time, I have learned how to live through the chaos, how to manage yourself through the chaos, how to manage others through the chaos. And I hope I can share some of my insights with all of you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. Welcome to the masterclass, and Team Tally is extremely excited and looking forward to hearing from you. Moving on, we have Dave with us. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as a member of the leadership team, Dave plays a key role in developing and executing the corporate strategy of the P&A Group, a collection of 7 separate enterprises. He directs the sales and marketing efforts for 5 of the business units and is the in-house consultant for the other 2. From industrial fabrics to environmental sustainability, Dave navigates time management and priority demands of a diverse portfolio. In an ever-changing business climate, Dave's passion is creating an environment where both the employee and the client thrive in mutually beneficial relationship. And there we go. We have Dave with us from Florida, United States of America. Welcome, Dave. Thank you so much for making the time for us.
Well, thank you, and I'll echo Kamal's comments about wish everyone safety and health, and thank you again for inviting me. Also, this is great. I've already enjoyed the information you've provided, and have a lot of questions even myself after all that. So thank you for sharing that, Doctor. Appreciate that. As you mentioned, the P&A Group is comprised of 7 different companies. 2 of them involve industrial fabrics. One of them is baby blankets and plush that we sell to local businesses or businesses across the United States. 2 of them are in the printing industry, particularly on paper products. And one involves environmental sustainability or rainwater collection. And then finally, the last company is involved in sample making for the furniture and the wall covering industries in the United States. 2 of the companies that we have within the group have very deep ties with India. The first one is P&A Industrial Fabrications. That's the first company of the P&A Group that got started. And our key relationship and strategic partner is actually a company in India that provides us with pretty much most of our raw material and goods, but they're very sophisticated raw materials because yarns can be different between the particular type of weaving that you want to do. So it's a model for us of strategic partnership. And then the second is environmental sustainability. We actually procure food grade barrels, which have pickles, peppers, and olives, and a significant portion of those barrels are imported in from India. And after the food companies take their processing, we go ahead and intercept them before they go to a landfill and convert them into rain barrels, which then homeowners use, connect to the gutter on their house, and collect rainwater for their gardens or even in some cases their yards. And so it's a diverse, I have a diverse roles. I wear a lot of different hats every day. I can wear multiple hats in the course of a given day, but I have a lot of fun and I love it. And it's definitely has been testing leadership during these COVID times about how you have to adjust and react and also seek those opportunities.
Wonderful. I mean, you have your fingers in all the pies, and I don't know how you manage that, especially during these times of crisis. it must be tough. And I'm going to come back with so many follow-up questions. We have some questions pouring in for you, especially on our chat window as well. In the
Excellent.
meanwhile, allow me to welcome our next panelist, who is from the Defense Services. We have with us an Army veteran, advisor, and board director, Colonel Anupam, a motivational speaker, special forces veteran, and an alumni of College of Air Warfare. He holds the honor of serving in almost all terrains from jungles to deserts to Siachen Glacier. An expert on anti-hijacking and urban insurgency, he has served in both northeastern states and Kashmir. He was selected to study and bring to India SAM missile systems. He commanded an elite air defense unit in the Western Theater. His experiences of tough military conditions leading to the survival of the fittest, coupled with a long tenure at the Cabinet Secretariat, India, have equipped him to develop techniques to manage people and lead teams in worst crisis situations. Well, your life has been full of, I think, always managing between life and death, and crisis has been like a Damocles sword hanging on your head, isn't it, Colonel?
Yes, Divya, thank you for keeping me on the panel. I feel really grateful to you. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot from the audience who will ask the questions and from the co-panelists. You know, Army brings up leadership in you. And this leadership converts a young boy into a leader, into a man. This is what Army is all about. You're dealing with situations which are non-financial, but you're dealing with situations which are purely dealing with the threat to the life, with the honor of your country, with the honor of your countrymen. You are taken as a synonym to the symbols of the nation, may it be flag or may it be any other symbol of the nation, and you are required to uphold them. Therefore, leadership becomes the paramount thing that a person in army has to learn and has to live through. This leadership is very crucial when we come to crisis. Today, the world is going through this crisis, and I'm sure every country, every leader is putting in their best. And I'm very hopeful that sooner than later, we'll come across the power and strength to tide over the complete crisis that we are facing now. And I'll be happy to take on questions and be a part and of contributing into the seminar or webinar, should I say, and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel. Very, very well said and very aptly put. And I think without any further ado, I want to make sure that we make the most of every minute that I have with all you panelists and get to learn a lot. So I'm going to move on to the next slide here, where we begin the panel discussion. So Kamal, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to throw you right in your face, opportunity or chaos. What's happening? Okay, I think I did mute Kamal. Okay, technical glitch here. Just hang on with us. Okay,
Excellent.
Kamal,
Can
you're
you
on.
hear me? Yes, I'm
Loud and clear.
sorry. I'm sorry. There was a background noise going on. I had to mute myself because I didn't want to disturb others. And so, sorry about that. Yes, opportunity and chaos. Yes,
Yes.
actually, they're two sides of the same coin, by the way. The
Okay.
trick, though, is inherently chaos means that there's no structure to information, no structure to decisions, no structure or organization to the movement of people and the partnership of people, right? How can you, through very simple techniques that are learned in a very difficult way over time, right? Start putting in some lighthouse thinking, right? That coalesces in a very simple way, right? Say within 10 seconds or 20 seconds to yourself to say, what is it I'm trying to accomplish? Very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated, right? And if you actually start building this trait within yourself, right? you suddenly realize that all this innovation that you see around you, right? All of these wonderful companies, genius leaders, fantastic management, agile mindset, creative thinking, all of this good stuff that happens, right? It's actually predicated on very simple thinking, right? And so to me, when I look at chaos, I try to distill everything down, right? To simple thinking. You don't have to make it complicated. And folks, sometimes they overcomplicate things. Actually, ideas are very simple. It is converting that idea into reality that is complicated. That's a whole different thing that you can get to it, right? But the first step is, how do you come up with the idea? And to me, that is actually what I love the most. Okay, um, I look at people around me. I look at my family. I look at my wife. I look at her decision making and how she handles me. By the way, for all of you guys who are married up there, right? Um, there are no better decision makers, right? There are no better prioritizers, right? There are no better empathetic, sympathetic personalities, right? Than your better self if you are of the male gender. Okay, that is my belief. I mean, I have learned this over time, and I don't mean it in a facetious way. I definitely don't mean it in a condescending way. I genuinely believe it, right? Because to what Colonel said, right? When there is no value, material value attached to something, right? There is a far deeper level of thinking, level of emotion, level of connection that drives your motivation, becomes a part of your personality, right? And I think the one thing, and I would love to hear Colonel Anupam's kind of views on this, right, is the leadership you see in crisis is cultivated over time. It just doesn't spring up in crisis. Crisis is when you get to demonstrate that. But you have to be constantly learning because you don't know when it'll become that, right? And to me, from an opportunity perspective, this is where the human aspect kicks in. And Dr. Jaitly, thank you so much, right, for putting those 5 pillars right up there, right? A key part, self-energizing, right? I mean, think of yourself as mental ultra marathon endurance experts. We don't do sports in 10 years. We do it for 50 years, mental sports, right? You're in and out of meetings 12 hours a day. Every meeting requires your full attention. You're required to do critical thinking, leading to decisions, leads to actions, lead to outputs, right? Everyone is expecting you and you're expecting everyone to be at their best, right?
Right.
How does that happen? Why do athletes have sports psychologists? Why do athletes have nutritionists? Why do athletes focus so much on self-fulfillment, right? Self-preservation, right? For the longevity of their sports life, right? Look at military, right? Very focused, right? This is what our objective is. We are required to be physical. We're required to be active. We're required to be intellectual. We're required to be interactive, right? In the theater when it happens, right? It doesn't happen by mistake. I mean, there is a huge structure that goes in. And for anyone that is interested in Sun Tzu's, and the art of war, you take the war aspect away from it, right? And you apply it, to the life you live, right? Whether you're in the pharma industry, healthcare industry, you could be in the textile industry, manufacturing, retail, any other industry you look at, right? And you apply it, and that's exactly what the military does, except that they do it, right, for kinetic engagement and defense of the country, right? And our theater is slightly different in the corporate world. So I'm going to kind of
That's
stop
great.
here because I know I've been
Yeah.
talking for the last few minutes.
No, that's a great, I would say, opening statement and insight. But tell me, what is happening if opportunity and chaos are two sides of the same coin? What is really happening in the healthcare system?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? What's happening in the healthcare system. I'll break it into, people, processes, technology. right? Let's just bring in 3 high pillars, just so much more easier to deal with it that way, right?
Sure.
You see through people, right? The fact that, because of COVID, the lockdowns, the prevention that's been kind of instituted right over there, uh, you know, the rapid adoption, right, of virtual technologies, right? Also on the healthcare system, right? Because think about it. I know we talk about COVID and the dangers of COVID and the fact that if you have comorbidities, which is essentially pharma or healthcare lingo saying that you have other diseases simultaneously, right, for which you're taking medication, and COVID is not the primary kind of disease that you have, right? There are still other illnesses in the world, right? There is cancer, right? There are heart diseases, right? There are what I call ophthalmological diseases, So there is still the old disease states that exist. It's just that everyone's really hyper-focused on COVID at this point, right? And what it is driving is a very rapid change in our case to things like telehealth, right? So how does a doctor that was so used to coming into an office, having office assistants, having a clinic, going to a hospital, still service those patients who don't have COVID but have diseases, right? Right. So we are seeing this transformation happen, and the pharmaceutical industry being part of the value chain of the healthcare industry, right? We are participants of that, right? And we see our customers who are patients and doctors, right? And we say, you know, and this is where I think the pharmaceutical company, at least in the US and especially for Novartis, right, where values are very important to us. Patient care, healthcare professionals, right? We think of ourselves as being part of that value stream and as being as important in providing that service, right, to patient safety, patient health, right, as much as doctors and hospitals do, laboratories, right? So from our perspective, it is, how do we spread the knowledge, right, of how to use our drugs more effectively? How can we use our existing supply chains, that some of which are globally dispersed, right, to retool them, right, remanufacture, drugs that are of more importance right now, right? What is the material, capital, cost, impact of that to the organization, right? And when you're doing that, are you seeing the amplification of value that you're providing to society, to our patients, right? I'll give you clear examples. One of the earliest decisions Novartis made, and we are not in the vaccine business. We are not in the vaccine business, right? Was to retool its manufacturing for one of its divisions called Sandoz. And Sandoz is very popular in India, as the
Calcium.
calcium tablets, right? Exactly. But it's
Yes.
really a generics pharmaceutical manufacturing company, is to ramp up the production of hydroxychloroquine, which in very early studies was proven, I would say empirically demonstrated, right, that it would help in abating the symptoms of COVID, right? We donated like 150 million doses. Like, this is within the first week of realizing what a huge pandemic this was going to be, right? Now that to me, right, so there is the intent, and this is the whole part about innovation, right? The intent. Is your heart in the right place? Yes. Okay, what can we do as a society? We can contribute to society by donating, right? Now, how do you then take that and make it a reality? We have to retool, right? We have to
Right.
reallocate capital. We have to reallocate priorities of an organization. You have an army of people working to make this a reality, right? Along the way, there's transformation that's happening. So what about our employees? How do they feel? They have families, right? They have elder people, they have folks, right, who could be more prone to COVID, right, and its symptoms, and not be able to recover effectively, right? How do you manage them at the same time, right? Are you empathetic to them? Are you sympathetic to them, right? To me, all of these things are hidden innovations, right?
Okay.
They're all hidden innovation. Not everything has to be radical. Not everything has to be, oh, we're just going to come and we're going to do something different. You take the case of, say, gene sequencing. I mean, 10 years
Right.
ago when SARS came out, it took us a year to sequence that gene. You know how long it took COVID? 2 months.
Right.
2 months. It's all it took. 10 years ago, right, we could not map the movement of populations, right, and the spread of COVID through human populations. Google, Twitter, and Facebook did it in 4 weeks, right? So just think about it. I mean, there's a company called I forget the name, it's called Biomed Data or something like that. They said they're going to come out with a chip. It's a lab in a chip. Within 2 hours, will tell you, right, whether you have COVID or not. I mean, just think about it. 8 weeks ago, it would have taken upwards of 72 hours to get those results. This is what innovation does, right? And innovation doesn't have to be like that. So I was reading a story the other day. There's a pizza shop, a pizzeria in New York City. Fantastic pizzeria, right? Went out of business. Why? Because of the lockdown, right? Now the question is, can you think laterally? And this is where this is genius, and you have to call out for it. These folks realize that they have a brick oven, right? That goes up to temperatures of 1,200 degrees, 1,000 degrees, which is just the right amount of temperature you need for masks to be formed, for COVID protection for healthcare professionals. And so they went out, and this person, the genius of this person, right, had the presence of mind to say, I have all of this infrastructure. I just need to apply an idea differently and see how can I retool myself for it. Right? And so all I want to kind of demonstrate is ideas don't have to be huge. Ideas are generally small, but the ecosystem you build around it becomes bigger and bigger over time. Should I stop here? Because I mean, I could talk for, so I tend to
No,
talk too
so
much. So please let me know.
of course. So if I have to, like, in a nutshell, just summarize that we need to find opportunity in a chaotic world, which is probably persistent. And as per you, crisis is inevitable and it is consistently surrounding us. It's not just
Yes.
COVID-19 crisis. We've been dealing with crisis all along, and
Yeah.
it will be coming in years to come as well. Finding opportunity in that chaos is where the key is, right? It is not an option for us. And healthcare system, and I know why you're doing so well as a strategic initiatives director, because you gave a well-rounded answer about your organizational initiatives. And I was trying to dig out some more initiatives that Novartis is up to. But that was very, very brilliant. And I think there's a learning in that answer for every person from across industry when we talk about transferable skills. And the pizzeria story, I'm going to use it for my next session on crisis leadership with any of the organizations. So thank
Absolutely.
you, Kamal.
Absolutely.
I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to go straight to Dave. Dave, yes, yes, I am going to unmute you. I think the speakers can keep themselves, yes. Okay, Dave, we did unmute you, and
There we
yeah,
go.
okay.
There we go.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely. No, so speakers can stay on unmute. That is perfectly fine. Um, okay, so Dave, we are talking about opportunity in chaos, right? And Kamal very nicely, through a story, through the initiatives that they are doing at the organization level, defined what all we can do with a lot of examples in different industries. He took a lot of different roles and responsibilities examples as well. Now, you tell me that he talked about transformational journey. Now, where does the mindset come in that transformational journey? How do we achieve an agile mindset when it comes to dealing with crisis or imbibing crisis leadership?
It's a great question, and boy, I got to ponder that for quite a while as you invited me to this session. And so I actually started at the base and looked at a variety of different definitions of agile, and a couple I landed on were marked by an ability to think quickly and be mentally acute or aware, and then having a quick and resourceful and adaptable character. I think all of us would like to have people describe that about us. My children, I can tell you, probably wouldn't. But so, you know, the answer to the question, you could say, so when should I have an agile mindset? The easy thing to say is, oh, I can apply it all the time. And that's great, and we should. But I think in a business sense or in a business climate and in a crisis climate, it needs to be a little bit more nuanced. And what I mean by that is, you know, for example, the ability to think quickly, we would all agree is an asset, but it's different to think quickly and act quickly. Sometimes when you act too quickly, you make a mistake. So I think there's a balance there that you have to understand. And the other thing is you want to adapt to the conditions in your environment, but that can be subtle or direct. If you make a huge adaptation, say too quickly, that could affect your results in a business sense. And then from resourcefulness, you know, in the United States, we have had a lot of responses by businesses to COVID-19. Many cases where businesses have jettisoned, we furloughed or let go, sometimes half or more of their employees. I'm not saying one way or the other whether that was the right decision or not, but in a resourceful or agile mindset, it may be you adapt or adjust what you're doing with your employees relative to making wholesale changes. And so as I evaluated this, I really looked at, there are 4 key questions that you can ask related to having an agile mindset. And one of those is you start first with, okay, so external and external components, have they changed the foundation of your business strategy? Because we spend, I know many of us in business, we spend a lot of time at the beginning of our corporate year or before then mapping out what we think is going to be a solid strategy for the year. And I know that when you get to the end of the year, a lot of times it doesn't look, your results may be what you wanted to be, but you got there by a different path. And so in this case, if the foundations of your business plan are solid, don't abandon it. Be agile and adapt. And so after you look at those external components about your business plan, then you have to say, where am I most vulnerable? And so one of the areas where we are vulnerable in the environmental sustainability businesses is that in the United States, there is some significant disruptions in the food distribution network. And that could lend itself to imports from India of our main and only item that we need is a barrel. And so we're very mindful about what are going to be plan B alternatives should that get disrupted. Then after you look at your vulnerabilities, and then the third thing is I say, what can be done quickly? And in our case, in our baby blanket and plush business, our goal, our business strategy was to sell into small businesses all across the United States. And in basically the last business quarter in the United States, many of those businesses, if they weren't deemed essential by the United States government, weren't allowed to be open, and many still aren't, depending on which state in the United States you're in. And so we pivoted quickly to direct from business to consumer. We raised our social media profile, improved our online ordering capabilities for direct line consumers, and that, while it will delay some of our revenue opportunities, it actually is pivoting us to be more agile in the future because we can now go business to business and business to consumer. And then finally, the fourth thing is I would say, where can you be resourceful? And that would be immediately for us, we went to our suppliers and said, let's work out some cost concessions if we can, or we were mindful, what's happening on your end? Where can we change this partnership if needed? Proactively on the other side, we offered additional terms to our clients without even waiting them to ask us, knowing that many of these businesses either have severe cash flow issues in this time or not even open for business. It's really hard to ask them for money or to pay their bills knowing they have no way to get income in there. And then we, in one of the businesses in the sample business, we actually switched our sewing capabilities because we weren't getting any work there to making non-medical grade face masks for people who are laborers returning to work that don't necessarily need to have something as sophisticated as that, but want to have some extra protection while on the job. And so the last one is under resourceful. One of the things I love about the ownership of the company I work for is they embrace this as an opportunity to see what happens to our competition. So we're watching them very closely, seeing what they're doing well, but also is there an opportunity either for additional market share for us or potentially an acquisition on the other side of it. So that's how we, from a business standpoint, an agile mindset is nuanced. It can be aggressive, but not all the time, because you may make quick and rash decisions as a result.
Wow. Okay. That gives us a really big global perspective and also an industry-wise, organization-wise, what you guys are doing to sort of get past all the hurdles that are coming in way of organizations such as yourself. Dave, I mean to also ask you, because there are many professionals who are here at our masterclass today who are also startups, who are CXOs, who are leading organizations which probably might not be as diversified or as big as yours. So personally, what can they do? What inspiration can they do? What are you doing for yourself? Because you gave me a good macro level picture. I want a micro level picture as well. As
Excellent.
a leader, what are you doing to get past this crisis?
So as COVID began to really become pronounced, particularly in the United States, and then became a worldwide pandemic, I recognized in myself, my skill set was, I feel, behind the curve. I always felt I needed to catch up, but this really aggressively made me say, I've got to address this. So education to me, I was stagnant in that, I would say, before COVID-19 started, and now I'm fully immersed and embracing it. And not even within my industry, I'm going to other people outside my industry to spark ideas. So I would say to everybody, be a voracious consumer of education. There is immense free stuff out there for you to get access to. There are people out there, like this class, for example, is a great way for you to get a diverse viewpoints of things within your industry that you can take back to your industry. So I would look at education. I would also say for the entrepreneur or for the small business owner, whether you have one employee or 10 or 100 or however many you have, they are access to you to help you manage through this crisis. Involve them in your processes and what you're doing. Ask questions of them. Say, hey, what about this situation? You are going to find invaluable. I'm blessed with a wonderful team at the P&A Group in a variety of different businesses, and they have taught me a whole lot. And I think the other thing is that don't put the burden of everything on yourself also. Small business owners or entrepreneurs, you have such an obligation, I know, to you, your families, and your employees. And so that's where go out and seek additional advice from elsewhere in the community and other areas there too, so that people understand you can show your issues and challenges to them, and they can probably show you things or counsel you on things you hadn't thought of before. So education, get your employees actively engaged in the issue and the challenges, make them be your fans. And then the third thing is seek out in the community what other things are going on.
Thank you. Thank you for your candid thoughts. And I think those three key takeaways are going to be very beneficial for especially the small and medium business owners, as well as a lot of entrepreneurs who've joined us. Okay, moving on, I'm going to come to you, Colonel. We've heard what organizations are doing. We've heard what healthcare system is doing, what supply chain is doing. I want to come to you and I wanted to get a perspective because your career has been synonymous to crisis leadership. And when we talk about crisis leadership, I want you to share with our participants what is leading through crisis? What is the meaning of that?
A very fine question. What is leading through a crisis? You know, Divya, in military, there's a parlance, there's a saying, military parlance, which says the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. Now, this saying is equally important today for the industrial, business, and corporate world. How much time before a crisis strikes us, how much time, money, and efforts we are able to give to our top management, senior, middle, and junior level leaders, and to our workers is going to decide our performance when a crisis strikes us. This is what it means. Now, when organizations, may it be defense or civil, find themselves in troubled waters, then despite their laid down strategies, newer dimensions are to be perceived and implemented by the leader to sail through the crisis. Whether or not an organization is able to become healthy again is wholly dependent on the behavior and command and control of the leader. Every leader has to prove that they are capable of a discipline which I am sure Dev and Kamal will agree is not taught in any university, and that is leading in crisis. When a crisis strikes or arises, the first thing people look forward for is a leader. Person who knows how to solve the problem and what necessary steps to do to reach to a solution. Very few individuals are expert in crisis handling. Problem is inexperienced leaders can make rash decisions, react too quickly to the situation, or worst, not take any action in the hope that it will solve itself out. But in today's when scenario, when the information travels instantaneously, it is impossible to believe that a crisis is going to solve itself out or burn itself out. I would give a small story to narrate and then reach the conclusion to show that what four behavioral aspects are needed for a leader to lead through a crisis. This actually happened with me. This incident is of mid 90s when I was posted on Siachen Glacier, the highest battlefield on the earth. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, after collecting the rations from the airdrop, about 23 kgs on each one's back, we started moving back to our post, about kilometer and a half. When we were just 400 meters short of our post, we were leaving the base of the glacier and moving up the hill. Suddenly a crevasse opened up. We all tie up each other in a rope with 20 to 15 feet a slack between rope between the two people. 7 people out of the 13 had gone up the slope of the hill. The last person gave a tug to the rope and he was hanging into the crevasse. Crevasses open up because the movement of the glacier, the movement of the snow, it goes like a slithering python. They open up and they close. They can be 2, 3, 500 feet deep, and the temperatures are from minus 70 to minus 120 degrees. If a person is left there hanging or fallen for about hour and a half or two without any rescue, he is sure to die. The sun was about to set. I informed the base camp. I informed my headquarters. I need rescue. The crevasse has struck. It was snowing so heavily that both the people raised their hand and they just said, "We'll just get back to you. Try and do what you can." Covering that 150 feet of distance took me 7 to 8 minutes in that heavy snow to reach this spot. And I realized the person is about 12 to 15 feet deep into the crevasse. He was alive. I was wondering why he's not gone down further. Now, I immediately took stock of the situation. I slithered down and reached that person. In a very weak voice, he mumbled, "Sir, I have twins, 2 years old. My father is paralyzed. Don't leave me here. Take me out. I want to live." As a leader, I was shaken. I moved up again because I had realized that his back of the person was stuck into the snow so deep, about 3 to 4 inches, that we can't pull him up. When I was going up, this man again mumbled, "Don't leave me, sir, I'll die." He thought I have abandoned him. I moved up, talked to my team, selected a strong man, moved back again with our ice picks, and we two of us hanging into the crevasse, started digging under his back to take him out. It took us 40 minutes. It was dark, sun had set, snowfall was very heavy, but we managed to free him from the glacier. The team pulled him up, and we carried him on our shoulders to our camp. Night passed, morning he was taken to the hospitals in Leh, Ladakh. He survived, but both his legs got amputated. Now, few things which a leader must realize out of this. The behavioral aspect that a leader must have is, at times, if speed is of far too importance over precision. You cannot wait for information to come in. You cannot wait for people to help you. You cannot wait for experts to come. If you are a leader, on the spot, you have to take decision with speed rather than waiting and taking time for precision. Number two, adaptability of a leader. You have to adapt very boldly. You cannot play with the rules of the yesteryears or of the peacetime. The rule book changes and you have to adapt to the situation very boldly. Number three, take personal ownership as a leader of the crisis. If these three behavioral aspects are taken care of by a leader, I'm sure he will sail through the crisis and be an immense help to the organization he serves.
Very nice. In fact, we have somebody Vinod Menon is sharing with us that one of the most important traits of an efficient crisis leader is to recognize that we cannot solve today's problems with yesterday's solution. I like that, Colonel, sir, and thank you for sharing that very personal incident that you had encountered in Siachen Glacier. And there's a big key takeaway for all of us that actually was a life and death situation. And there are many times in corporate world and business world where we have reasons to crib and we have reasons to complain about. And I think we need to learn that there are some people in the military, those who are at the borders or you're driving some very critical operations, they are leading through physical and emotional and spiritual crisis. At the same time, I think we can be resilient enough as crisis leaders in present day scenarios to overcome these and take lessons from them and devise our own innovative solutions to deal with it. For me, the personal takeaway, I think, Colonel, is that sometimes we need to come up with smart solutions and not precise solutions. And I think sometimes we all get caught into that, where we want to be perfect, we want to be spot on, and we delay decisions. But
Very
in
correct.
organizations, I've realized, and I think Kamal and Dave, you will agree with me that sometimes we can't get stuck in process. We have to take decision and we have to kind of go ahead with it and implement it in, again, the interest of ourselves and our organization. So we are constantly aligning our strengths and we are constantly collaborating, we're constantly resolving. Wonderful. I think that just sets the entire stage, all three of your perspectives for the questions to come. The questions are pouring in, and I'm getting pressured here by the participants. So I'm going to straight away deep dive into it. We also have a poll that we have, kept for everybody, but I think in a few minutes from now, we'll do the poll and we'll continue with the Q&A session. We did reach out to all of our registrants who in advance if they wanted to submit some questions, and we did have a few. So I'm going to start with those before I get into some live comments, feedback, and questions. We have one of the big industrialists from Jaipur, Rajasthan, Dave and Kamal. I hope you've heard of Rajasthan, and Jaipur is the pink city. It's very famous. A lot of people like to go there. And we have Mr. N.N. Bhandari along with his 20 key leadership team who've joined us here on the masterclass. His question, he's asked two questions. In fact, I'm going to start with this first question. COVID presents an unprecedented landscape where the future is totally unknown. Should leaders lead based on their intuition and experience during these times, or does scenario planning work? I'm going to take quick two perspectives from Dave and Kamal both. So Dave, over to you.
So I tend to fall on the process side of things. However, that's not, I think, what is needed in this time. I think we have to, in COVID times, I never was good at predicting the future anyways. I'm really not now. And so I think it's important for us to continue to prepare for the unknown and be ready and be adaptable on the other side. So you can run scenarios. I think that's great. But I prefer, even in this times, just to be ready to be adaptable, because even in our situations, things have changed from week to week. And we thought, wow, this is what the new normal's like. And then the next week comes and it totally changes everything. So that's my perspective.
Oh, wow. That's great. Kamal, what about you? I mean, do we bank on our experience, intuition, or the scenario
It's
planning
both.
work?
It's both.
Okay.
So there are gray lines, right? It's quite blurred, right, in that sense. You have to understand, please, that innovation is a process itself. Okay, I mean, so Novartis, for instance, is a pharmaceutical company, right? When we go about discovering molecules, right, that eventually turn into drugs, I mean, we discover thousands of molecules, right? And the likelihood of a molecule going just from the discovery, right, to be even applicable to, say, phase 1 of clinical trials, it's 1%, right? And there are 3 phases of clinical trials. And if you take 1%, 1%, 1%, all the way to what can actually get to market and be of benefit to the patients, you're actually looking at 0.001%, right? So the one thing I want to tell everyone is there is a time for innovation that you can bank on. And then there's a time for innovation related to wild thoughts. That's the way I look at it, right? And folks sometimes find it difficult. Dave, I would still like to say that process has a place, right? Now the
Definitely.
thing is, do you have the foresight to think of innovation as a process so that you can embed it into the DNA, the thinking, and the personality of your teams, right, and your peers, right? So that it builds into an organizational muscle memory. So when crises do happen, you're not thinking about muscle memory, you're just reacting to what's happening, right? It's like an athlete that trains hours and hours and hours on the field, right? I mean, for folks in India, I mean, you must be conversant with cricket, right? Why do cricketers train so hard in off season? Because when it is game time, when it is crisis, so for a cricketer, every game is a crisis. You have to win or you lose, right? You cannot at that time be trying to learn all the skills necessary to play cricket. I mean, you've got to be an expert at that part of it. So critical thinking, reasoning, emotional stability, right? Um, Deriving ideas, right? From opportunities, looking at analogs in your industry. Say, well, maybe the pharma industry, we don't have an answer, but what is the laboratory testing industry thinking about it? What are the hospitals doing about it? Can we derive something from that to get direction? So there will always be chaos. Can you get direction from that chaos to say, well, if I look at that direction that industry is moving in, and they're kind of like my industry, right? Now do I have to start thinking and extrapolating what may happen? And all you can come up with at the best in the best way, and Dave, you alluded to, right, is options, right? But you still rely on the process, right, to give you the most risk-averse option that gives you the most benefit at the end of the day. Okay.
Interesting. So a blended approach is what you would say, Kamal.
It
So
is done.
if I had to put like a, percentage ratio there, what about you, Kamal? I mean, between planning, scenario planning work and intuition and experience, would it be 50-50 to deal with the crisis situation in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of look into how it feeds into it, right? So when we say critical thinking, decision making, right? This goes back to, Colonel Sir, right? And when he said that, you know, how much do you sweat, right? The sweat you put in, right? In the peace times, right? Leads to less blood in the war times, right? Critical thinking, decision making, emotional tuning, psychological, energizing, right? Those are behavioral changes.
Correct.
That is something you have to drive within the organization as a cultural DNA dimension, right? You have to build it over time. It just doesn't happen. But what I'm trying to drive at is that there's always a time when you say, I have to start now, right?
Right.
When do you? I have to start now, because you'll always say, well, I'm not ready for it. And you start having these wild ideas, right?
Right.
But that's
Right.
exactly where leadership steps in. Leadership is not about being a subject matter expert. It's not about knowing how best to fire a gun, the fastest way to fire a gun, how accurate am I, right? Are you a data scientist, PhD, that can do data and you're statist? No, it's not that. It is that I understand all that, right? But then can I make the right decisions, make
Right.
transparent the rationale behind those decisions, so that a group of people who are depending on you for direction, right, have a clear line of sight, right? What is blue sky? What is my ideal state? Why can I not achieve it today? It could be people, it could be capital, it could be marketplace challenges, it could be competition, but how do I crawl? Right? And
Right.
it is these planning scenarios that you have to run through, so that then you're focused on what's my lowest hanging fruit. Okay. Okay, I go from 0 to 1. I need to reach to 10. So you lay out a game plan for what does 10 look like, right? But you focus on what it takes to go from 0 to 1, right? Because it
Right.
goes from 1 to 3, right? It goes from 3 to 6. It goes from 6 to 9. It is always compounding. That whole evolution is compounding over time.
So it's interesting because it shows me great encouragement when our participants are usually, summarizing it. And we had Mr. Menon saying that it is the pre-crisis preparedness which
Yep.
is going to help us deal with the post-crisis issues, right? And that's what, in a nutshell, you are emphasizing on, Kamal. I'm going to quickly come to Dave. Dave, we have Mr. Vishal Seth, who has actually shared a question with us much in advance. He works with Jindal Group, and he says, when should one define a problem as a crisis? Is there a benchmark?
Wow, that's a really good question. Everyone's having insightful stuff here this morning. We do try to set, we do every year in each one of the businesses, we do what's called a SWOT analysis, or SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And in and through all those, there's quite a bit of time spent on our strategic planning meetings, where we work to address those particular elements. Two of them are external, two of them are internal. And so through that exercise and work, what happens is we come out the other side. And as a matter of fact, our chief financial officer mentioned when the COVID crisis started, that we actually had addressed some of those external threats. Not you didn't predict a pandemic, but we had addressed what would happen if there's significant disruptions in the market. And so for us, a SWOT analysis for all the businesses and constantly referring to it, and then maybe going back and being agile and adapting it from my segment, allows you to keep yourself focused and on your ultimate goals and address what changes might need to be made in that process.
That's interesting. I hope that kind of helps Mr. Seth kind of understand what we can call a crisis. Now, how do we safeguard long-term strategies from short-term opportunities arising during crisis? David, Dave.
It's the same. I'd say both and that's part of the planning process too. For example, one of the businesses of the P&A group is actually was we had no intention of. It was procured. We procured them this year. It was right before COVID started, and it's been a great acquisition. That wasn't on any one of our plans this year, and so I think you have to continue to be prepared and adjust accordingly. And so I feel I always want to be opportunistic. Our team and the ownership group, when we first started going into COVID, I had to use the euphemism. I was a little bit of a glass half full guy. I'm like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And our CEO said in a meeting, he said, no, you need to see what are the opportunities that you can pursue. So as I mentioned earlier, on one of the things that you can do on resourcefulness is look at the opportunities that you can do to come out of this. I think Kamal, you had mentioned the pizzeria doing, taking a food place and making masks out of it now. That is an opportunity that that is totally outside, I'm sure, their original business plan. But as long as opportunities in your business plan, you can think and do things like that.
Absolutely true. Colonel, I'm going to come to you. There's one question by one of the guests who wishes to remain anonymous. And the question is, how do we identify and nurture motivation in crisis?
Okay. See, in crisis, motivation can come if the leader has credibility, the leader has integrity. And during the time when there was no crisis, what contact he had with his team, what were his communication skills with the front runners on the ground, could he communicate with? If during that time he did not put in his efforts and sweat, well, during crisis, he may not be a very successful leader. When the crisis strikes, it tests the leadership, and more often than not, the leaders fail.
That's interesting. I think that is a learning for all of us, Colonel. Thank you so much. We have a lot of questions coming in, so I think I'm going to minimize my acknowledgements and key takeaways, and I'm going to quickly go around the room here to all our panelists. We have a question from Mr. Sanjay Jairam. He's a very senior executive vice president with the Jindal Steel in Bombay. And his question is, what are the three major directions that leaders would be required to give to their employees going forward as we step into this new normal world of business? It's interesting that he's asking for three, and we have three guest speakers. So I'm going to come to each one of you, and you can say one each, right? I'm going to repeat the question here. Three major directions that leaders would be required to give their employees going forward as we step into the new normal world of business. Dave, which is yours?
Okay, I'll start, and mine is going back to personally for me. It's also that has been adopted and embraced by the team is having your employees broaden their education themselves. Instead of staying so focused in their lane, let them reach out. Again, great resources out there for people to tap into free, get diverse options and opinions, not only within the industry that you're dealing with, but outside. I'm learning so much from two other people and yourself, Doctor, on on just different aspects and perspectives that I get to take that personally benefit me. So education to me would be for your team is critical.
Excellent. So we have education there, right? Kamal?
So to me, so Dave, you kind of stole my point there.
Sorry.
I'm just saying, so I'm going to fall back on my contingency. No, so I would say this is the best opportunity for everyone to understand their customers, right? And take extreme ownership, right, of the customer's needs and experience as they're going through this crisis. to me, there's nothing more invaluable than looking at how others are reacting, right? So that you can get a deeper understanding, right, of the realities of their life. Right? At the
Great.
end of the day, we just need to show empathy and focus towards our customers, understand where they're coming from so that we can build better services and products for them.
Okay, great. So first is education, second is accountability, right, Kamal?
Well, accountability and insight, curiosity, more than anything
Curiosity.
else,
Okay,
curiosity.
okay, great. Colonel, the third directive.
Well, I'll say making your team understand smart trade offs before
Okay,
the crisis strikes. And that means urgent versus important and survival versus success. What is important at the time of crisis is survival. If we survive, the success shall follow.
excellent. Thank you, gentlemen, for answering the three directives. I'm going to move on to the next question here. And we have Mr. Sudeep Sharma asking, kindly just let us know how the simple ways to keep our subordinates motivated by our leadership qualities when business is on a downward trend in the market. Oh my God, we have a lot of people asking about motivation. So let me come to Dave. Dave, quickly, what are you doing to keep your teams motivated during these lockdown times?
So I'll steal this from an author in the United States, but I've adopted what's called the 51% method. So, as a leader, you have to make decisions decisively, but at the same time during this time, it's so important to bring your team along with you. You don't need to be out there on an island. And so I promote and want rigorous debate and dialogue back and forth. But ultimately, then, as a leader, when you make the decision, you have to have the confidence that your team behind you is going to go with you on it. But if they don't trust you, or if you're not seeking their input and advice on it, you may alienate them. And so to me, it's really involving them in the process so they feel like they've had input into the final decision, even if there's disagreement.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Dave. That really throws a lot of light in these times what we can do, and I think we can imbibe those learnings as well. We have Mr. Surya asking this question: is laying off and adopting pay cuts the only measures the most accepted by global leaders to handle this COVID crisis? Kamal, this is the tough one. I'm going to throw it to you.
Look, so I'm a half full kind of person, right? I have always been a half full kind of person, right? And in my line of work, it helps to have a positive mindset and reaching to a positive intent, right? So I think implied within this question is the fact that, that we know or understand the reality of these very difficult decisions, right? That these leaders are having to make. Nobody likes to shut down their business. Nobody likes to lay off people, right? It has material impact on society, on our families, right? Whether you like it or not, right? So it's a very difficult decision to make. From a Novartis perspective, I can tell you, it's not just Novartis, the pharmaceutical industry, right? We took the perspective that our talent is our wealth. So furloughs and layoffs are the last thing, right, that we want to do, right? However, I can't say that if the economic conditions didn't improve rapidly, right, we would be forced to making these difficult decisions. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I do not have access to the CEO of Novartis, Vas Narasimhan, to figure out what his rational decisions are, what his leadership's decisions are in leading to the worst case scenario, which is a furlough, right, or a layoff. We don't have it in our plans at all that that's going to happen, right? But I choose to give them the benefit of the doubt at the end of the day. So, attitude matters, okay? Attitude matters because that at the end of the day is all you have. At the end of the day, all you have is your positivity to live with. I always tell my team members, you will always have crises. Crises can really suck. And this is an American expression, it can suck, right? Now the question
It
is, do
is.
you want to mentally suck with it? Or do you mentally want to be safe and happy, and then deal with the crisis. Today, if I cause suck on my mental ability, nobody else is going to suffer except for me, right? So why? So I think that's where a positive mental attitude, right? Looking for the positivity, right? In these times of crisis, it helps in clearer thinking. That's really where it leads to at the end of the day. And Colonel Sir has far more field experience in this than I do, right? But I'm just telling you my life journey and like working with my teams and others who I have influence over, right? In that there is something amazing about being positive, about being genuine, right? And about being a human being. And I think that's the most important thing your team wants to see from you, right? Are you a good human being? Do you have integrity? Do you stay by your values, right? Do you exceed the values of the organization itself, right?
So are you still in the good books of your team? Have you laid off
I
anybody
hope
from your
so.
team?
I hope so. I hope so because I tend to get invited to some meetings that I think I shouldn't be a part of, but for some reason they want to persevere through me speaking, right, in those meetings, right? So yes, I mean at the end of the day, that's all you can hope for, right? Is to show folks that this is not the end of the world.
Right.
Okay, it is a crisis. It is a moment in time. It is part of your life's journey. You don't know where your journey is going to end, right? So treat it like a moment in time. Don't treat it like it's going to be for eternity, right?
Right.
And eventually you'll get over it as a team.
Well, thank you, Kamal. At this moment, before I continue further, I'm going to request all the panelists to give me a thumbs up because we've already reached 90 minutes, but I have a lot of questions to go. So I hope it's okay if we bleed a little bit of time. Kamal, you're good to go? Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry for eating into your weekend time, but this is going to be really great. Colonel, I'm coming to you next. There is a question from Sanjeev Chandel. Learned during my defense services to wait, watch, preserve, and act in a right time with full strength to overcome any bad situation. Shouldn't we follow the above in this time of global crisis?
Yes, question is very fine, intelligent question, but wait and watch. Wait for how long? Watch for what all? When the crisis strikes, financial crisis is not a thing where the life and death is required that in half an hour you got to or 1 hour you got to take a decision and implement it. No. The companies have their own financial coffers. They know for how many days or weeks they can sustain. So they have to really wait. I agree. They have to really watch the scenario. I agree. But then there has to be a limited time with the leader. It cannot be that you are reacting after waiting, you are reacting after watching. No, you have to take decisions before these problems strike you. You cannot be knee jerk reactions giving all the time. This is what my submission is.
I think you've very well summarized it. We can't have knee-jerk reaction at all times. At the same time, we need to have a shelf life of our waiting period as well. I have also seen in many organizations that some leaders kind of stall on the crisis, hoping that it will sort things out and not take some tough decisions or especially confrontal decisions. But I think it is important to do that. And I'm going to move on to the next question from Mr. Sanjay Fairvani. He works with an organization called Forbes Marshall Group, and he's thanking all of us for this brilliant session. And his question to all the panelists is a leader's response to adapt to the change situation in terms of the behavior and precautions at the workplace, and how to augment oneself with insights, innovation, and implementation in the new world normal, which is setting in. So I think we have more or less kind of answered this in bits and pieces, right? We've addressed innovation, we've addressed motivation, we've addressed insights and implementation of the new world normal. I think a lot of questions are revolving around the future of work. So let me get a quick perspective in a few lines from each one of you. Dave, what is the future of work going to be?
So For me, I have been a long time remote working on and off in my career. It's just been a part of in my sales part of things. That's what's happened. But I think one of the definite things we have to understand is what is an office culture environment going to look like? And is remote work the direction you want to go? Or do you still want to hang on to an office environment? I don't have that that question answered myself, because as one who works remote, I think one of the things you miss are what I call those ad hoc hallway conversations or spontaneous interaction back and forth that's harder to happen. That's when you work remote or in a setting like this. But I think the idea is, what is going to be your base of operations in the future? Is it going to be this type of style, or is it important that you hang on to a more structured corporate environment?
That's fantastic. What about you, Kamal? What is the future of work?
Well, I mean, the future of work is undeniably going to skew towards remote, except for what Dave very astutely pointed out, right over here. There are going to be certain professions, there's certain roles, right, where, brainstorming, right, group interaction, right, freedom of interaction, right, is very important. And something that does not come through in remote work and remote interaction is, a lot of what we as humans derive in communication is actually the physical aspects of communication, less the words, right? And this is where, when it comes to ideation, for instance, right, you know, personal interaction becomes really important, right? It's less the words, right? It is the full package, right, that needs to be present, engaged, right? Ideation and innovation is intrinsically conflict ridden. And when I say conflict, I don't mean it's blows. I mean it's differences in thoughts, right? Because at the end of the day, if I have three participants, they will all have three different perspectives, right, before they come in. And as you iterate through the process of brainstorming, right, you all come together to a common set of goals, objectives, right? And that is part of, conflict transition to a common goal, right? And that is intrinsic to innovation, right? The last thing that should happen in innovation is to work in a very siloed, insular way, thinking that your way is the only way. On the contrary, innovation is quite the opposite. Innovation actually forces you to open up intellectually, right, to others who may have opposing viewpoints, right? And that's where, at least from my perspective, I do find it a hindrance. I'll tell you right now, I do find it a hindrance. I cannot brainstorm with my team, right? As much as, and also innovation requires, you can't innovate in a work environment. And I'll just lay it out there. You have to be in a certain frame of mind. You have to be in, and you have to create those frames of mind, right? When I was on campus at Novartis, right, I would tell people like, just want to have a chat with you. Forget me being a director, you being somebody else. I really don't care. I'm a human. I need to share some ideas with you. Let's grab some coffee, right? And we'll just talk. And it's just amazing that when people just start talking without the layers of bureaucracy that sit within the organization, you know, you get really good insight because people are pouring their hearts out to you, right? And they may not know the words, they may not know the business context, but if you can peel away the onion, right, get right down to the core of what is the intent on what they're trying to express, right? Then from your vantage point, because you're slightly higher than them, you pull it up, right? And translate that for your leader so that they can pull it up to an abstract layer higher. That's when you actually start becoming a channel for innovation. You are not the innovator. People may see you as the innovator, but you're really not the innovator. You're actually just collecting information. Okay?
Right.
Um,
I know. So we have Mr. Sundaram from Singapore, who is actually participating in a masterclass here. And he did ask us a question on the three traits. And I think, Mr. Sundaram, we've already answered that. And also, you can refer to the superior qualities from the first slide that I shared. In case if you joined in late or you missed it, we will be sharing all this deck through a YouTube link, and you can always refer to this entire masterclass later. Moving on, there is a question from Mr. Surya Pawar. Could any of the panelists answer, how do we keep existing customers motivated and still continue doing business with us, knowing there is a huge liquidity crunch in the market globally? So I'm going to dissolve this question into two segments. I think we've addressed a lot of motivation there. Dave, talking about liquidity crunch in the market globally, what's your take on that?
So it goes back, maybe very simplistic, but keeping lines of communication open with your customer and making them understand that you are a partner to come alongside them. So for us, we have had strategic conversations with our key suppliers, as well as a variety of our customers. I like to think every customer is key. And it is each one is unique. So you cannot look and say, here's one solution for all of your customer base. It is what is individually needed for each one of those. And so as our reps representing the baby blanket and plush business have gone out and re-engaged or talked to customers, we have multiple calls daily where they'll call back and here's this unique situation about this customer. What can we do to address them? So it's not a one size fits all. I think you really need to focus and spend time with each customer individually.
Right, right. No, very well said, Dave. And, this is getting more and more interesting because we are trying to cover all aspects here. We also have somebody asking us a question on, migrant workers, but I think we are going to refrain from that because that is more of a political scenario. How about Colonel, you answer, what can we do for the migrant workers, because it is an appalling state of condition and we don't want to talk about the governance here, but what is it that we can do?
Well, right now, what the approach government has taken is the only answer, that they should be reached to their hometowns as the government has decided earliest. Now, in this earliest, someone say the steps taken by the government are sufficient, some may say not sufficient, but only the governance knows how much they can spare, seeing the community spread of this COVID-19 at this stage. So each state government, the central government, these are the people who are the best one to take the steps, and they are legally elected leaders by us only. There is no reason for us to believe that they are not taking the correct steps or the adequate steps what they should do.
Right. No, thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I hope that answers your question, Ranjana. Thank you for sending us that query. We have Mr. Kanitkar here, Ajit Kanitkar, who's joined us from Tieto. Um, it's a leading IT organization, and he's asking, how do we see the possibility of still balancing the industrial growth, setting up of big business complexes, that is huge buildings, technologies, and being able to preserve what is left of the environment, nature, and earth? This question with the background of what we see now. I think, Dave, I'm going to throw you this question.
So I'll do from a comparison in the United States as we struggle and work through somewhat post-industrial. Our society moved from manufacturing to more service-oriented quite some time ago. And now, actually with COVID-19, our government has recognized there are some systemic and very critical industries that have exclusively moved off-site, off-country. And so now there's a lot of discussions internally about other avenues and areas for us to either bring those industries back, which is a free market for us. It's not anything that can be dictated. It basically has to happen organically. Or are there other alternatives to where we are, where our resources are at and where we're getting them for right now? So we're going to be living through that somewhat as it relates to ramping up an industrial society. I think has to be a solid partnership between industry and government. where government comes alongside and plays a role. I don't, in our case in the United States, it's not actively in part with businesses, but there is partnership. And as you manage this growth in this industry, and as that happens, probably in our case, it would have been better as a country if we had a better partnership between the two. So businesses and government both should seek those partnerships together, and I think you'll have a better long-term outcome as a result.
Right. We have a follow-up question to that, Dave, from Mr. Jugal Kishore. He's saying, according to this economic crisis all over the world, which business will have more future in the world?
So I'll probably say in my case, I'm not objective here. I have a child that is in the computer industry, particularly in computer coding, involving a lot around AI development. And so I think that technology is going to continue to be an avenue and an area of growth. We see it here in the United States all the time. So technology. I also think, though, getting back to basics, particularly in the United States, we are seeing a shift and a move to have a more organic produce industry and food industry, where it's less scientific from the standpoint of genetically altered foods and that sort of thing. And so I think for us, that industry is going back to having more holistic, naturally grown products. And so those two areas, I think for me, I see, at least in the United States, and even technology-wise global, have an impact.
Right. Thank you, Dave. And from Ramesh Sood, I'm going to put this question to you, Kamal. Does any one of the panelists think that world will really change when it comes to our own personal emotional and materialistic needs as drivers, which have been driving most of the behavior in the past? It's a personal question.
So look, whenever you have global events, right, it does change human behavior, right? I mean, you look at, you look at all the world wars that have happened, right? It intrinsically changed human behavior for generations to come, right? I mean, the Great Depression of 1929 led to a whole generational shift in the perception of the American population and what they considered, right, to be acceptable standard of living, right, acceptable kind of aspirations, right, versus today. You look at our parents, right, and they always tell us, right, you got it so good, and yet you guys complain, and we tell our kids the same thing. You got it so good, and you complain, right? At the end of the day, and that's the generational shift that's happened, right? I mean, you look at 2000, September 11, 2001, with respect to the U.S. context. It forever
Right.
changed the way security and transportation in the U.S. was going to be managed. And we were willing as a society to make that trade-off, right? So, to think that something like COVID is transitory, right? My personal belief, it's not. It is going to be a huge shift, right? It's going to be a huge shift in mentality, right? The way we go about thinking about our personal lives, our families, right? I mean, so think about it. I'll give an example, right? There's a whole generation of college students who are going to be graduating this year. Will never get to go for a convocation. This is a once in a lifetime event, right? It's a huge emotional impact, huge emotional baggage that they'll probably carry for the rest of their lives, right? So that little impact will have the butterfly effect, right, on their lives at the end of the day. You don't know, right, that you cannot extrapolate from the past saying that, well, because these were the parameters, these were the economic models, these were the behavioral models, and so I'm going to put a strategic plan ahead and say, well, what I assumed 5 years ago will stand true tomorrow. No, it won't. You have to understand, right, what the key generations, what is their thinking, what impacts them, right, to then come up, right, with a new insight, a new approach. And that's really what you're seeing. And Dave, I completely agree with you on that whole AI thing, right? It's all about automation. It's all about velocity. Okay, it is all about velocity of decision making. velocity of data gathering, velocity of manufacturing through robotic automation, right? Velocity of operations through robotic process automation, right? It is all about velocity. So there is going to be an intrinsic change. It's here to stay.
Great. And I have, Colonel, one question for you. Dr. Jyoti Gokte is asking, as a leader, what is that one important point or quality to align with the mindset of the employees in the new normal? That one key aspect or one key attribute that you would rate at top?
Very difficult to name one. When we talk of leadership, it encompasses so many qualities and characteristics that a person must possess. Each characteristic and quality relates to a different type of scenario and different organization. However, the integrity and embracing action. Embracing action is no punishment for the mistakes. Accepting the punishment, accepting the mistakes of the subordinates is what I will say should be the quality of a leader.
Right. Thank you so much. I think quickly before we get on any further, I'm going to do a poll here, and I will request all my guest speakers to also participate in the poll. We'll have some great statistics, and I'm deploying the poll right now. It's just 5 questions. It's been wonderful to have this session, and we still have some more questions here. Sorry, 4 questions. Please do participate in the poll. Your feedback is very, very important to us, and it will help us curate our next masterclass and session well. I can see the results of the poll, which are coming in very, very encouraging and supporting. While the poll is going on, I'm sure, Dave, you had a question for the other panelists. So why don't we end on a very, very high note? What is your question to any of the other panelists?
So, wow, that's I only one. Colonel, I would just like to, I guess the question for you, someone had kind of raised it earlier, but what is the essential thing that you want out of folks, your subordinates or those under your command? What do you want them to provide you to be an effective leader?
Colonel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, but not very clearly. Can the question be repeated, please?
Sure. Colonel, as a leader, what do you want from your subordinates or those under your command to help you be a better leader?
There are few things I will insist upon. If it is junior people, then it is physical toughness. If it is little senior, middle level and senior, then mental robustness. There's a difference in physical toughness and mental robustness. And then the communication skills are a must so that they are able to communicate to me or to the leaders in between what exactly is the problem or how well the ball is rolling. Thereafter, the decisiveness and calm and control attitude. These are the 4 attributes I would name. Calm and control means the crisis will come, the problems will come. If up to lunch session things are fine, the post lunch there may be a problem. But how calm and control that person is. Even if at times, now I'll come to the senior management, the VPs and the other, there are situations when your teeth are chattering, your knees are knocking, you have butterflies in the stomach, but you must show to the team that you are calm, control, and situation is under you. You must fake it till you make it.
Interesting, interesting. That is some perspective and lots of food for thought. Well, I'm going to share results of the poll, which are in as well with all the guest speakers here. You've spent so much of your time with us, enriching all of our knowledge and, helping us learn from each other. And while the people continue polling, Kamal, what is your question to either Colonel or Dave? Who would you like to ask question to?
Um, so two different questions, two different people, right?
Okay.
It's actually the same question, but I want to get your different perspectives on it, right? Colonel, from the moment you started your career, right, till the moment you ended your your distinctive career, right? Dave, same thing for you, right? Uh, can you reflect back on the person that was many, many years ago, that set off on this path, right? And maybe two or three key milestones, right, that have made you the leader that you are along that journey.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Be the first one.
Oh, thank you, Colonel. Um, wow, that's a really good question. I go back to early on in my sales career. Well, first of all, overall, I've been blessed with wonderful bosses, superiors, but they've also been mentors through my career. And early on, I had a boss. She nurtured, and anything that I got excited about that fell within our corporate strategies that helped, she nurtured that and encouraged that and push that. And so much so, I reported to her at 3 different times in my career because I fed off the energy that she gave me. It went back and forth. We worked well with it. And so that then all through those milestones for me, it's been when a mentor has come alongside to me or someone has come alongside and been very honest with me when either my performance has been good, but it also has not been good. And they invested the time to get me better. And so I can't say enough to anybody, to everybody who's out there. If you don't have someone who's a mentor or someone you can go alongside of, it doesn't have to be your boss. It can be someone else in your life that comes alongside and holds you accountable. It will immensely help you in your career.
Wow. Thank you, Dave. Colonel, would you like to jump in?
Oh, yes, for certain. See, when I was young, when I joined, I was just 20 years, 4 months old when I became an officer. I was posted in Run of Kutch, a salt pan. I was told by superiors, that you are to be seen and not heard. A very funny thing, which I feel should not have been there. A youngster must also be heard. He can't only be seen. But physical fitness was emphasized maximum. Initial 4 or 5 years, I only worked on physical fitness. That saw me through to the Black Cats, the top special forces of India after a few years. But a number of people I picked up one or two qualities and tried to hone my skills on them. There was a gentleman called Kashinath Khanna, and I remember I served under him for 3 times. A man with very ill temper, but a genius, military genius. He nurtured, he coached me, he guided me, and I achieved all that I have achieved to a great extent. I attribute to that man.
Thank you so much, Colonel. And thank you for sharing all your experiences. I'm gonna, attract all of your attentions to the poll results here, and this is very encouraging for all of us. So, 83% of people thought that their experience learning about crisis leadership was excellent. So, claps and kudos to team. Thank you, panelists. We are in distinction. And which of the topics are you interested in? Well, all our audiences, out of them, majority want more on leadership. So I'm probably going to rope you in some of the future sessions as well. And we have them recommending us to their colleagues and friends. Thankfully, nobody actually voted for no. And they said 90% said yes, they would be recommending our masterclasses with the panelists. And guess what? The last question was, what did you like the most about this masterclass? It was multiple choice. We got 63% for content. We got 63% for delivery. We got 60% for moderation. Oh my God, I need to work on my skills here. And we got 83% for the panelists. So kudos and a big round of applause to all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you for making this masterclass session really meaningful and very, very valuable. I have non-stop comments pouring in here where people are personally thanking me for organizing this session and bringing each one of you in. In fact, all of them are taking your names individually and thanking you for these key insights, which are going to influence their leadership style, their teams, their careers, and their roadmap ahead. So once again, Dave, thank you so much. It's
Thank you.
been a pleasure and a privilege. And I think
Same
our
here.
connect has just started. And there's always a cosmic reason how we connected, why we connected. And I would like to continue our journey of learning from each other.
Absolutely. Thank you. This has been humbling and a lot of fun and a lot of learning too. Thank you so much.
Is there a final message that you would like to give to all our audiences here in the times of these unprecedented times? What is the final message?
Well, first of all, I'll start with what Kamal said at the very beginning, that please, everyone, please, you, yourselves, your family, your coworkers, please be safe during all this. There's still so much that's unknown. And so continue to find that right balance of engagement versus safety. And then for me, I would just simply say that this, I feel, is a time of opportunity. It is crisis, and we need to manage the crisis, but I would rather make the opportunity word bigger at this time because it puts us all in a better frame of mind, reaching out to look for what can things that we can do better, knowing that we have to manage the crisis, but opportunity to me. Look at this as a chance for opportunity for yourself personally and for your businesses.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dave. Kamal, you've been a great support. You were the first panelist and guest speaker who came aboard. And in fact, I used your designation and your fancy title to rope in Dave. So,
That's exactly right.
I hope I didn't let you down.
no, you did not. No, you did not at all.
And then actually when I saw the Colonel come on board too, that was like we call it the icing on the
Nailed
cake,
it.
so that was great.
Thank you.
So thank you, Kamal. What are your parting words to all of us here?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo every word that Dave said, right? Be safe, right? There is opportunity in crisis. You can see it unfolding in front of your eyes. Okay. For everyone that is interested in innovation, if you ever want to get inspired, there is a US fund led by a very energizing lady. Her name is Catherine Wood. She runs the ARK Invest financial group, right? And they focus only on investing in disruptive technologies, right? Extremely inspiring person. She inspires me. I listen to her YouTube webinars like every week to see what does Kathy have to say today, right? If you are interested, if you're curious about how the world is transforming, that's my one recommendation is you can definitely rely on her. God knows where your intellectual curiosity will take you, but please be curious, ask questions, be like a baby. That's the best way to learn.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kamal. I think I'm also going to follow Kathy from now on. And I will encourage you and Dave both to start your own web series as well. We would love to hear you as icons and leaders of tomorrow, to share your insights and learnings that can also help so many of us who are in different parts of the world.
Well, you know what? I just want to keep shut and listen to Dave, right, for like 30 minutes, 60 minutes nonstop. Because I think I'm a lot more intelligent now than I was 90 minutes ago.
What a compliment.
I'm honored. Thank you. Humbled and embarrassed and all that good stuff. Thank you.
Colonel, you are synonymous to living in situations in life and death, and we have learned a lot. And I'm a diehard patriotic, and I think I salute you. I salute your service to our country, and I still salute because you are doing a lot of voluntary work with a lot of organizations who are struggling with leadership. So first of all, on behalf of all of us, I think I can take this privilege on behalf of Dave, Kamal, the private
Absolutely.
corporate sector to thank you for your service, not just to the nation then, but even to as a consultant to the organizations now.
I'm
And
humbled.
what
Thank you.
is your message to all of us?
In India and Asia especially, the COVID has a long way to go with us. We cannot ignore it. So each one must hone one or two special skills and go digital. The change world is going to change. The working conditions are going to change. The attitude will take a beating. The only way to live, survive, and succeed is hone a new skill and go digital.
Thank you so much. That is a very valuable message to all those who are still here in this meeting. Thank you for joining us in this masterclass. It is always my endeavor to bring you original, new content, which in contemporary times is relative and relatable. I'm seeing your beautiful comments and feedback. Please do write into us, and I'll be happy to share it with all our panelists. Stay safe, keep smiling, stay positive, and deal with crisis as a leader. It doesn't matter whether you have a big team, small team, you're one person army. I think the key takeaway for me is you can be a leader within yourself and you can lead in different spheres of your life, whether family, society, colleagues, or when you decide to give back as a philanthropist. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we will be back soon with a new masterclass, a new topic, and some new insights. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Team Tally, for making this technologically possible and connecting all of us from across the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.